Hello ULF, welcome to the newest edition of our channel. I am Chairman Jack.
Hi everyone, this is Comrade Taras.
Hi, this is Comrade Magne.
Hello there, this is Comrade Volgin.
And today we're talking about austerity. Now we already did a video about what is austerity, so honestly we're just probably going to get into what austerity personally affects things around us, what austerity means to us as individuals, and honestly what austerity means to everyone and what austerity does. So honestly I can start with a personal story of myself. Was something I think a lot of people have seen was my school privatized their cafeteria due to the fact of having less money from the government. I even came from a rather bougie or affluent area, you want to call it, and I think the fact of the matter is austerity still affected a lot of people there due to the fact of people got fired from their jobs and were basically let go, so they wouldn't have to pay them tenure and wouldn't have to pay them more for being longer time employees, and they entirely replaced every single person in the kitchen with brand new people. And they even started to want to privatize janitors. I've been out of school for 2 years, so I don't know how that went, but they've just been constantly they don't hire in. They try to push older teachers out and try to hire in new teachers just so they don't have tenure. Honestly, even at the most basic, everything around us is still being constantly privatized. Our electricity, our utilities are all private utilities that have monopoly contracts, etc. And it's just disgusting and vile to see as people don't have any other options other than just to accept austerity.
Right, you don't own the land you live on, you don't own the house you live in, you don't own the water that you drink, you don't own the heat that you use, and you don't own the electricity that runs everything in your life. You don't have any control over any of these things, and you have very little connection to it because someone else is the one pulling the strings, and someone else is the one who controls those things and controls the capital that makes this process
Do you
work.
have a personal example, Taras?
I think a big one would be I was working at a restaurant, and it was right on the border of a town that was on really, really dire straits and really hard times, and then a city that was very affluent. And the contrast between the two is really stark, and I mean you can tell it's like a light switch when you cross from the border from one to the other. And I just remember a lot of my coworkers who I worked with, who I was working in the kitchen and working in the back and stuff, and doing expos and all that, working in the dish tank. And I mean I would be working with predominantly African American people and predominantly Latino, who a lot of the people were undocumented immigrants, and they would come there and they'd be working their asses off 12 hours a day. They would have to worry about transportation, they'd have to worry about inspectors, they'd have to worry about having a job secured for the next day, because if some little thing happened, they could have their entire livelihood taken away from them. And the fact that most of them had to rely on the bus system to get there were guys that I knew that got fired strictly because the buses show up late, or they didn't have a ride secured, or they couldn't rely on someone, and their entire life gets derailed by that. It's not the same as somebody who's in a more affluent position, who can afford to fuck up, who can afford to have bad things happen to them. That's the reality, is that when you're living at a certain level, and when you're
living paycheck to paycheck.
Exactly. When you're feeling the effects of austerity, you don't have that option, and you don't have that luxury of just being able to, brush it off. It really hits harder.
Yeah, not only you're living paycheck to paycheck, you're also just solely living day to day on the fear of losing your job, the fear of losing the one thing that is able to help you provide for not only yourself, but for many people, for their families, their kids, and in a lot of cases for parents and stuff that are retired and so forth, that also have been screwed over by austerity through things like getting their pensions cut, getting government benefits cut. Yeah. So it's a matter of paycheck to paycheck for most people every day. It's also a matter just solely of existing and living day to day, and not knowing whether that next day is going to be secure, not only in your paycheck, but in your home, and your ability to feed your kids, and being able to pay the water bills, and being able to provide basic, luxuries to yourself and to your
Not even
family.
luxuries, amenities.
Amenities, yeah.
Necessities to live.
Yeah.
Volgin, do you have any experiences that you want to talk about?
Well, I am from a small rural town, and it was badly affected by the '08 crisis, the '08 financial crisis, which was caused by austerity, partially, and the aftermath, which barely recovered. Um, last summer, I worked in lawn care, specifically mowing, and it was the first time that I'd ever had any interaction with the workforce. And I, of course, had known, like, the different statistics on everything, but never, like, seen it firsthand.
Lived it.
Yeah, because I grew up in a petty bourgeois house, so wages have been stagnant for the past 40 years while productivity has gone up. And currently the federal minimum wage is $7.25, which is, I mean, granted in most states it's higher than that, but that's the federal minimum wage, and it hasn't changed in 10 years. Now, I worked with one other person on this mow crew, and the guy made $12.75 an hour. He hated his job. He was being taken advantage by our boss, and he had 3 kids to take care of and $700 rent that he constantly complained about. So it's just like, I learned a lot from my experiences over the summer, and it helped me kind of come back to Marxism in a time where I was kind of isolated from that and everything else. So really, I haven't experienced it myself, but I have seen it. I've seen how ugly it can be, and let me tell you, it is ugly. It is disgusting what austerity has done, just to just to like an ordinary person,
Because that's who it affects the most.
Yeah.
Is the average individual.
Yeah.
I would say the number one thing I want everyone to take away about talking about austerity is austerity affects everyone. It affects everyone. It affects every single person, no matter what your background is, no matter where you're from, you are affected by austerity. Whether, you're white and live in the suburbs, you're affected by austerity to a different degree than, someone who is black and from an urban area, Detroit, Chicago, wherever. You're both affected by austerity in vastly different ways, and one is vastly worse than the other. But the fact on the table is, like, austerity affects everyone. It's government corruption. It's when the government is increasing taxes on your paycheck and you don't get anything in return. We have this illusion, your money gets taken to Social Security, and a lot of people are like, oh yeah, I don't have to put in as much for retirement because it'll be there. But guess what? Due to austerity, that isn't going to exist. They'd rather spend money on the military, they'd rather spend money on corrupt schemes for themselves, and we won't have a retirement. We will be one of the first generations to be truly informed that we are fucked and we don't have a retirement.
Yeah, and I just want to throw another example out there. Example from my own life. My mother, who is disabled and lives off of disability and Social Security that she paid into for decades, she, at this point in time, by about the end of the first week of every month, is living off of about $100 for the whole month, after paying for the apartment and paying for a basic necessity of like internet. Something that in today's modern world everyone needs.
Yeah, it's a necessity.
It's a necessity. And just with that and food, literally end of the first week, she's left with $100 to survive on for the rest of the month, and that's impossible. It's borderline impossible. She has to cut insane amount of corners just to barely get by. And so I think that's just a case of like austerity affects working people very certainly. It also affects those who can't work in horrendous ways. Those that are disabled, those that can't be in the workforce, those that the society needs to assist and take care of, and the cuts to programs like Social Security, the moving and shifting of money that so often occurs with that, and the cutting of programs like disability and so forth through austerity also wreaks insane havoc in many people's lives.
Right, that's the insidious goal of it, is to remove people like that from the equation. Because the entire neoliberal philosophy is that if you can't pay for it, then fuck you. Like, you deserve to die. If you're not contributing to the level that we feel that you should be contributing, or if you're not giving what we want, then you aren't part of this.
You're not worth having around.
To quote a student, and I'll name him. His name was Andre. He was a white affluent kid who exclusively wore polos to class, and we brought up neoliberalism, right? And so this other kid said, certain people just are so impoverished, and housing is going up more and more. So sometimes, people need 2 jobs and they still can get by. They still are living paycheck to paycheck. And his reply was simply, well, then you work 3 jobs or 4 jobs, and if you can't live off of that, you deserve to die. Verbatim quote. And so I think this just goes into the mindset of these affluent people, these, settlers.
Justification.
Yeah.
One in a long line of justification.
That people use is, to say, oh, these people are poor because they deserve to be poor. These people are poor because, some predestination from God, that they're just so incompetent that they deserve to be poor. But that's foolish. That is foolish. Because let's say, a poor manual labor job like seal coat, ditch digging, anything like that. That takes more labor than fucking Jeff Bezos, and I apologize if anyone is uncomfortable by swearing. This is just a very, hot issue to me. Is, they work more physically than Jeff Bezos and his bald, peanut-looking head does than anyone. They do far more. They do far more physically and mentally going through that and going through these mental anxieties than these billionaires will ever do in their whole lives. So I think this is so integral to talk about is people aren't poor because they're destined to be poor. People aren't poor because they work hard. They are poor because the system that is created is designed to keep them impoverished, is designed to keep them in chains, is designed to keep them down.
Yeah, that's perfectly well said. I mean, there have been studies that shown that the workforce in the United States has never been more productive, and yet, as I said earlier, in the past 40 years, wages have completely stagnated. More and more people live in poverty, and it's fucking ridiculous. And the fact of the matter is that around the same time, these billionaires came into being, because billionaires are not. This is a new thing. Billionaires have been a thing ever since the 80s. Like, before then, they were just millionaires. Now, millionaires are assholes, too. Don't get me wrong. But why the fuck does anyone need to be a billionaire? What does that say about you to wake up in the morning, have the amount of money to be able to, to lift people out of poverty, to feed people, and yet they're like, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to keep my billions. I'm going to be a selfish prick.
Mike Bloomberg would rather spend $363 million in 2 months,
Jeff,
5 months, or whatever it is.
Jeff Bezos decides to buy the most expensive house in L.A., which is like pocket change to him. It's ridiculous that a system like this can possibly exist.
And the thing, he gets rich off of these people.
Yeah.
It's that he takes the money of all these people, he profits off of all of these people, and then spits in their faces.
Yeah.
And says that he doesn't owe them a dime.
Yeah. And these workers have been worked to near death. Multiple times. Multiple workers have nearly died.
Well, there's also the example of the fact that at many of Amazon's warehouses, just a little more example out there, is that Jeff Bezos sees it that for him to make a bigger profit, it is better for him to have ambulances on standby outside of Amazon facilities instead of actually funding working air conditioning in their factories. Many Amazon facilities have ambulances paid for that will wait outside of facilities for workers that possibly might have a heat stroke instead of actually funding air conditioning in the facilities.
So disgusting, and goes hand in hand with this corruption that we're seeing, like in Detroit. Something we've seen very, very strongly firsthand is city workers have lost their whole pensions, 80%, almost, I think in many cases, all of their pensions. And what did that go to? That went to $1 billion to Dan Gilbert, the guy who owns Quicken Loans, and I believe H&R Block as well, and the Cleveland Cavaliers. And what did he do with it? What did he do? He bought multiple more office buildings, and what happened after that? Well, people who work in his office buildings no longer pay taxes in the city of Detroit. They pay $40 million a year to go directly to Dan Gilbert's pocket, and he got $600 million straight out of Detroit workers' pensions. He got $600 million.
That's
here you go.
So messed up.
Under the guise of reinvesting that in the populace and in reinvesting that in the people that he's taking it from, when in reality, that isn't happening. That is never going to happen. And you can never incentivize a billionaire to make that choice for other people.
And then another thing that happened with that is Little Caesars Arena that just got built. They come up with Mike Ilitch estate and his various family members come up with this vague lie that they paid for it out of pocket, when in actuality they got $500 million directly from the city of Detroit, directly handed from the taxpayer money from schools that no longer exist. They entirely eliminated Detroit public schools and now created Detroit community schools, which is an entirely separate entity that is still under financial advisors actually until recently, where now they're trying to levy another bond on top of it and make hundreds of millions more dollars off of this Detroit public schools. And it is so vile to me that people just say, oh, that's life, billionaires get money. No, we should be mad, we should be furious that near billions, $1 billion was given directly to Dan Gilbert's pocket over people losing their pensions, losing their houses, being forced out of the city that they've lived their whole lives in, just so another billionaire can live lavishly and can do whatever he wants. It's disgusting and it's vile. It is immoral. Capitalists cannot hold some view that they are the moral just when billions are dying every single day due to things that would simply be stopped if mass austerity did not exist.
This is the final stage of decay in capitalism. This is it, my friends, because there is no way that it can survive beyond this. There's no way.
Nothing else to squeeze. You can't squeeze the sponge anymore. Every dime has been gone.
They've outstretched themselves. And sooner or later, and let me tell you, it's probably going to be sooner now because of all that they've done. They're not going to last that much longer. There's going to be a revolution, and it's not going to be pretty.
Right, they'll run out of people to rob.
Yeah.
There's only so much you can take.
Yeah, and then the people will take back what is rightfully theirs.
Yeah, I think it's really a case of anyone who builds their fortune, builds their masses of billions of dollars off the hard work and sweat of working people. I mean, it just, you got to go to the logical conclusion. No person works the amount of time required to earn $1 billion. I mean, studies have ran the numbers, and for someone like Jeff Bezos to earn what he has by working in a job like he provides, these shit jobs that he provides, he would have to work, I think it's over 1,000 years plus, just to get close to earning what he owns in wealth. So no capitalist who has their millions and billions worked hard for it. They got lucky, they made one or two right moves, and then they reaped the benefits of it off the backs of working people. And now, as it's been already mentioned, now that it's to the point where they've earned such a massive accumulation of wealth, one of the most massive accumulation of wealth in all of human history, they can't go any further. So where do they have to go? They can't create more wealth, so they have to take it. And that's why we're seeing austerity. We're seeing that last vestige of wealth that they do not have control over being taken and siphoned as violently and as firmly as possible. It's just, I mean, like, why have they garnered such an interest in space travel all of a sudden? It's because they don't have any more wealth here on the planet to extract, and the little bit that they do, they are currently working on trying to do that. Capitalism must always expand, it must always grow, and it's reached that limit. It's reached its ability to grow, and so now it's working inwards on itself to try to take whatever wealth it can to expand, and there's not much of that left.
Right, I mean, the ultimate teleological endpoint of capitalism is the destruction of the working class and the destruction of humankind, because it subsists off of taking from other people and giving to strictly people who are the owning class, not the working class, but the owning class that controls the labor and controls the wealth of other people. And as long as that system continues to stay in place and continues to build itself up and up and up, we're only working closer and faster towards that endpoint where we're eventually just going to hit a wall, and there's nowhere to go past then. Mm-hmm. I mean, how could you possibly even believe in in a future past that point if you run out of water, you run out of clean air, you run out of actually providing roads and providing healthcare and providing all these different systems to people? When you've sapped the earth of that and when you've taken all of these different social nets away, then what is there? I mean, you have these privatized, you have businesses that you can go to for that, but what's the fucking worth in that? What's the actual value in these faceless corporations that are just robbing and robbing and robbing? Eventually they'll run out of gas.
Exactly. I think I just hope that people listening to this have, continue to think about these things and continue to view every current existence as a struggle under capitalism and a struggle under mass austerity. No one is safe from it, and everyone is affected by it. So I just hope everyone continues to think and continues to grow. join a local organization against austerity. And does anyone have anything to plug?
Support your local unions.
Okay, well, I've been Chairman Jack.
Thank you very much. This is Comrade Taras.
Thank you for listening. This is Comrade Maine.
Comrade Volgin.
Thank you for listening. I hope this leads to more productive conversations in the future.